welcome to episode 2 of the Bulls REKAP broadcast. I'm Joe Cowley from the Chicago Sun-Times. You could read me in the newspaper. You could follow me on X at jcowleyhoops. I don't advise you follow me. It's not a fun follow sometimes. But hey, I'm excited for this first show that I'm doing by myself. And so I was looking around and saying, who do I want to talk to first? And Chuck Swirsky, who I think has the coolest story of the Bulls season so far. So I wanted to talk to him, and that's why I said, Chuck, you're my guy on this first solo podcast. And look, it's funny because I think a lot of people think that you and I have beef because I do like to break your balls on Twitter. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're travel buddies, talk a lot about life, not just basketball. And that's why I wanted to bring you in, because I think the coolest story of the Bulls season, people could talk about the Orlando comeback. They could talk about being down 20 twice. I thought the coolest thing was you now getting a chance to run into both of your kids in this business, which and doing different things. TC is coaching the G League Memphis team.
Yes.
And your daughter is still with the Wizards, and she does the Mystics too?
Yes, Kara. Yes.
Kara. Okay, so I think it's awesome because, look, this business, I remember when I first started in baseball, my concern, I was a young dad. I only had Aiden at the time, and baseball is a travel nightmare. Luckily, my wife was a stay-at-home mom, so she could come on some of the road trips and stuff. But I remember feeling like you feel some guilt because this business pulls you away from your family a lot.
Yes.
A lot. And I remember talking to Ozzie Guillen about it. And one of the things Ozzie told me, which always stuck with me, is it's not about quantity, it's about quality. He said there's dads that are taking their kids to school every day in the car, probably don't talk to them, drop them off, go home, go to work, come home, golf, come home at dinner, say hi to their kids a couple times. And so it's about the quality. And so when you're coming up in this business and you have a family and stuff, how was that a concern of yours that, look, I know the routine. I have to leave a lot. I have to leave these kids behind, and it's tough. I mean, do you remember that? And just, did
Absolutely.
It play tricks on your mind?
Absolutely, Joe. Number one, thank you for the invite. And no, we do not have any issues whatsoever. And I appreciate you very much. So to look at my career, I got married in my mid-30s.
Right.
So I was pretty well established as far as my job with WGN Radio. And just to give a little background, so I'm doing play-by-play for DePaul. And I loved everything about GN, living in Chicago, doing DePaul, because at the time, under Ray and Joey Meyer, DePaul was a major
Right.
top 15 program. And all of a sudden I get called in, and my boss, Dan Fabian, who's a great guy, he says, listen, we're really struggling dealing with rights fees with DePaul. This is going to be our last year, and we want you to stay. Everything's cool, but we're bringing in Northwestern. Well, Dave Ennett, who does an outstanding job as voice of the Cats, and he was coming in with the package, which is no problem. I had no problem. Dave's a great guy. In fact, I hired Dave. But I wanted to do play-by-play. So the kids at the time, TC was 3, Kara was 18 months, and Judy was pregnant with Mark. So we moved to Ann Arbor. I do the University of Michigan. And Joe, let me tell you what, Michigan is like a pro franchise. Their branding, the type of athletes they bring in, everything first class. So I only had to travel maybe once a week because I didn't do football. I did pre, after, and post from the studio. Basketball, as you know, college, 26, 28, 30 games. You're not on the road much. You're in and out of a Big Ten city. Then all of a sudden, the Raptors knock on the door.
Yeah.
And, I was always intrigued with the NBA. I wanted the NBA. And I'm thinking at the age of 40, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it now.
Yep.
So the travel was, and I'm going to be very blunt. I've never told this to anybody, but since we're on this subject, I'll tell you. the first month of calling play-by-play at the NBA level, I was absolutely horrible. Seriously, Joe, I
Because,
sucked
because it
because
was new to you, or because just the schedule was kind of just kicking your ass of this. I mean, there are no breaks. It is just boom, 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 boom.
right, great question. A little of both. The game was so fast.
Right.
I was used to a very methodical, you know, college basketball where you're playing a team, they don't have talent, so they're passing the ball for 20 seconds
Right.
and you're
Being
getting these.
overcoached, coaches yelling from the sideline.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And you're getting these 52 to 46 games. Well, at the NBA level, on any given night, a team's getting 40 points in a quarter. And so, but it was just the style of the play and then the travel. And I mean, it caught up with me. But then, you get in the groove and you get
Right.
back on track and everything turned out. But this was in an era, Joe, before FaceTime. And I'm not saying FaceTime can replace one-to-one personal
Exactly. Right, right,
interaction,
right.
but at
Exactly.
least, Joe, it's visual.
Yes.
The FaceTime had not arrived on a phone yet. And so here I am. I'm doing a Raptor Rockets game in Houston, Raptors Kings game in Sacramento, and my kids are at basketball practice. They're at piano recital, and it broke my heart.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet at the same time, I was able to integrate them into when they would come to games. That post game, they would sit right on my lap,
Right, right.
and all these NBA players are around. And
And
of course,
those are memories. Those are memories that they all take with them.
yes. So,
And that's huge.
yes, I've got pictures of, one of my kids with Vince Carter and all these, I mean, Tracy McGrady. I mean, so the Raptor thing was a wake up call.
Right.
And so the Bulls then called in 2008, and I left Toronto. And I love Toronto. I mean, it's an unbelievable city. I became a Canadian citizen, the whole bit. I thought I was going to be there for life. But when the Bulls call, you got to go.
And now your kids are what age when you go to the Bulls?
TC was, let's see, 2008. So he was 16, Carol was 14, and Marky was
Okay,
12.
so they're high school, entering high school, middle
Yes.
school, and that makes it a little easier. I've got my oldest is obviously living with me because he's going to law school now in Chicago, but to have my middle being 16 and my youngest being 12, they understand the rhythm of what we do. They understand the flow of what we do. They learn to miss you when you're gone. Well, sometimes maybe the 12-year-old doesn't always miss me, but you know what I mean.
I
And
hear you.
so,
But Joe, you know what? I have a regret about this, is that TC was a very young 16 going 17 going into a senior year.
when you moved them,
And I moved him. And I'll tell you what,
oh yeah,
he
that's tough.
was the starting point guard on his high school team. He was going to be named captain of the team, and he got moved.
Oh,
And it broke my heart. And if I had to redo things, Joe,
you'd leave them up
uh,
there.
I would have left them up with a
Yeah.
family who's and their son played on the same team. TC and Matt Marshall got along extremely well. They were brothers.
Right.
And if I had to do it again, I would have left them up there, and then we would have worked it out to how we managed to see them.
And you'd have
But
left them there to cross over and kill those Canadian basketball players up there. I love it.
well,
So,
remember he was in the league with Tristan Thompson,
right.
Corey Joseph, Kelly Olynyk. The Currys were there briefly. So, I mean, it was a really competitive league.
So when your kids tell you we want to get into basketball, I mean, look, these gigs, whether it's PR, whether it's what you do broadcasting, I mean, there's only 30 of you in the country, right?
Yep.
And then coaching, I mean, out of the probably broadcasting and coaching, you're basically you're hired to almost get fired or have that fear of getting fired.
Correct.
PR might be a little safer, but when they all tell you, we're not following you in your exact footprints, but we want to get into this business in some capacity. Are you all in, or were you like, I mean, There's a
Yeah.
short. These are tough. These are tough gigs. These are tough gigs to get.
Oh, and well, so let's talk about Kara. So Kara goes to George Washington University, and tough academic school. I
Right.
mean, great school.
You kind of want to
And
push her to law, don't you? At that point.
yeah, well, yeah,
Go to
and you
law.
know, Joe, the thing is, and I swear on my parents' graves, rest their souls, I never pushed one child into
Right.
sports. I never said, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, nothing. And they came to me, and Kara said, you know, I mean, Kara is very, very smart, very bright, extremely has a great feel for basketball. And so she went to the Wizards and got an internship. And they put her in media relations. And as it turns out, she graduates from GW and she goes from an intern to a full-time employee in media relations and with the Wizards and the Mystics of the WNBA.
Right.
And so in the case of TC, he loved basketball. He was a gym rat. He had been exposed to the University of Michigan as a kid. Robert Traylor, rest his soul as well.
Tractor Trailer. Yep.
Tractor. I love Tractor. What a great human being. He would put TC on his shoulders and he would swing him around like a Nerf ball. And, you know, Rob Pelinka, now the GM of the Lakers, was my broadcast partner.
Right.
And I mean, Rob was great to him. And so he literally morphed into a situation where it was Michigan, Raptors, and then as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid with the Bulls.
Did you know he had a mind for coaching?
Well, that's another great question, Joe. Here's the thing. So he got an internship. He went to UNLV because it came down to UNLV or Baylor. He wanted to get into basketball to some degree, player development, coaching, whatever. And he was still trying to figure things out. We went to Waco, Texas. Scott Drew, I've known Homer Drew, who's the father of the Drew family at Valparaiso. And Scott was great. Bryce was great, by the way, and still is great. But Scott Drew was magnificent. We go to Lonnie Kruger, and I've known Lonnie since he was head coach at Texas Pan American.
Right.
His college basketball backcourt was Jim Molinari, who was the former head coach of University of Minnesota when he replaced Monzon. He was the head coach at Bradley, Northern Illinois. He and Lonnie were backcourt teammates at K-State. So I met Lonnie through Jim like in 1979. And I said, TC, you know what? I know Lonnie. I'm not pushing you to go anywhere. This is your choice. He sat down with Lonnie, and Lonnie was unbelievable and said, you know what? You can come in here. You're just not going to be a guy handing towels.
Right.
And that
Right.
wasn't the case either at Baylor. But TC blossomed at UNLV. And so he did everything at the UNLV program.
Is that when he got the coaching bug, you think?
Well, a little bit, because then he was able to help out USA Basketball during that 2 or 3 week stay that they get ready for the
when
Olympics.
they go against Team Select and all that. Yep,
Yes.
Yep.
So he did that. He did summer league with a couple of different teams, and one thing led to the next. And he gets an internship with the Portland Trailblazers, and he's doing everything.
Right.
I mean, like in the basketball outside.
That I remember. That's when you first introduced him.
And yes,
Yep.
and then he became full-time. And then Taylor Jenkins 3 years ago called him and said, you know, we've heard about you, come in for an interview. We have the head video. He did that. And then they brought him in and said, we want you to get into coaching.
Right.
And I mean, like you never want to be in a position where you tell your children what to do or not to do.
Right.
The only two requirements I have for my children, I mean this sincerely, Joe, I want them to be healthy. I want them to be happy.
Yeah.
And happiness is very sporadic in
Yep.
life. I mean, we're feeling great on Tuesday. We have a tough day Wednesday. We're really struggling Thursday, but we get right back on in the grind. So, but those are two elements. I want my children to understand, like Marky teaches English in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He loves it.
Loves it,
He,
probably.
he,
Yep.
he he's not connected to sports,
Right.
follows it a little bit, but not really. And you know what? But he's happy. He's helping people learn the English language. He's taking students or young people or adults and teaching them adjectives, verbs, pronouns, how to write a sentence. It's wonderful, and he
Yeah.
loves it. So to me, if he's happy and he's healthy, great.
Yeah. Here's a because I know you don't take off many games. So I thought one of the
No.
coolest things was
Yeah.
you taking off that Saturday game, which, by the way, this people don't realize there's a rhythm to this, like Chuck and I were talking about earlier. This November schedule has been brutal. I don't
Yes.
remember a schedule like this to start a season. And people don't like to hear us complain about, travel and home and away, home and away, home and away. But it's been a kick right between the legs.
Yes.
And I know you don't like to take off games. So the fact that you took off that game in Atlanta and made it down to where were they playing? Mexico City?
No, they were in Rio Grande Valley,
Rio
which
Grande,
is on the
okay.
border of Texas and Mexico. 10
And
miles.
for you to go down there, first of all, you got to interview him the week leading up to that because we were in Memphis, and then for you to go
Yes.
down there and take off to see his first game coaching, I thought, I mean, that's awesome. That's chills to me. That's goosebumps. And kudos to you because to me, look, you can have all the awards and you can have, I mean, you have your resume is ridiculous with Hall of Fames and blah, 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 bobbleheads. You got it all. The bottom line is at the end of the day, the footprints you leave are your kids.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so for you to take off that time, I think shows kind of, and that's why I was like, I need to have Chuck on for this first one. So, all right, enough of the family stuff because people are probably like, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's important stuff, especially in this business.
Yeah.
The other couple things that, because I sit next to you at some of the games, and the two things I always wanted to ask you, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'll wait to the podcast to ask him. So ball, and I think most guys that are doing play-by-play know ball. The thing that always intrigued me is you're working with someone. Usually, it's someone who played ball in most circumstances.
Yep.
How do you make sure? Because if you wanted to, you could break down a play. Vooch was dropping there, blah, blah, blah. That led to, him rim running, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
However you wanted to break it down. How do you make sure that you are saying enough, but still making it so your partner doesn't feel threatened by your X's and O's? And have you ever had somebody say, hey, Chuck, that's my department?
No, that's never happened.
Okay.
It never will
Okay.
because you know what, Joe? I go into a broadcast like I love working with Bill, just like I love working with Leo Routins, who was a former #1 pick by Philadelphia, was an All-American at Syracuse, Jack Armstrong, head coach at Niagara. But the way I look at it, this is seriously, I mean, I'm very passionate about our broadcast and I love it. I'm doing work as we're speaking. Notes,
I'm going to talk to you about your card too, by the way, after this.
But
yeah.
Here's the thing. I've got a 3-time NBA champion sitting next to me who I love as a human being. He is an awesome person. Bill Wennington.
He's the greatest.
He's the greatest.
Yeah.
And so I would be foolish, Joe, not to tap into that. I don't have all the answers.
Right.
And I don't pretend to. I mean, I see the ball, the shot is taken. I know what's a bad shot and a good shot, what's a bad play and a good play, whatever the case may be. But I've got him sitting next to me. I would be an idiot not to tap into that. So, and we've got a rhythm down. You talk about rhythm. Well, we've got a rhythm down where I know he's coming in and out. This is our 17th year together. And so, and we've got a 24-second shot clock. And by the way, this is radio. This isn't TV where you see a play and you can continue to talk about that play 6 seconds after it happened. On radio, Joe, it's boom, boom, boom. But with Bill, I give him and I forward. Anytime he wants to come in, he can come in. And I mean that. And yet he knows also
does he touch does he ever touch your arm and say, I'm going to say something. There's none of that. Okay.
No, because you know what? Because we've got it down.
You got it down. Yep.
And I appreciate that. And that's why when Bill is gone for family reasons or whatever, it's hard all of a sudden, we get someone coming in and, the cadence is off and because I want to extend a welcome to them for coming in to do an NBA game. And I always tell them, if you got something to say it. But then I also say, you know what, just then tap my arm because it's a new environment.
Right. So, I've seen your card, your prep card. Adam Amin has shown me. So Adam, obviously the TV guy for the Bulls, outstanding. His football, by the way, he's the best.
Yeah, he does.
His football broadcasts are the best. So it was last year before a Steelers game. Everyone knows I'm a big Steelers fan. And so he showed me the pre-interview stuff they did and the things they talk about, the stuff that was all written down. And then I noticed in New Orleans, and I've seen your card before, but the prep you do, I mean, do you break down each? I know you watch film. I know you watch broadcasts of others.
Yeah.
Do you, is it just little notes, or how much of the stuff do you just kind of put in your head and say, okay, this dude, obviously in this last game, they're really attacking him on pick and roll, and that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, how much detail do you put on that card? Because I saw little notes. You jot down their school, or you jot down little things. Right. Are those just little flashcards so you could say, this is what I want to say about this guy?
Well, to some degree, but here's the thing. I don't have a service like teams do or people do that email them every morning.
Like Stats Inc. that tells you everything you need to know
I
about
don't do that.
Yeah.
Joe, let me tell you what. This is all handwritten. This is all
that's what it looks like, people. I saw that. I was like, look at that.
This is all here. This is all notes. Okay. This is all New York Knicks notes. And so everything I do, it's work. I watch, for example, the Knicks. I've seen their last 3 games. I saw the Philadelphia game last night, and before I saw the Indiana, I saw Atlanta. I mean, this is important because I want to get into sub patterns. I want to see what they run. And I'm not a coach, but I want to be prepared in the event this is a late clock situation. Who's going to get the touch and where that ball is going to be sent to one spot on the floor. And so that's what, I'll tell you what, you can talk about Karl Anthony Towns and you can talk about Jalen Brunson, who's great. Tonight, I'm talking about Josh Hart. I love Josh Hart.
Yeah.
I love the way he plays. He never complains. All this stuff about Tibbs minutes. I did a pregame show with Tibbs for 5 years. 5 years. And I learned more in those pregame shows than with any coach I've ever had. And Billy's right there with him, by the way.
Yeah, Billy's great with X's and O's.
Here's the thing.
Here's the thing. Tibbs has, and I've tried to explain this to people, and it's really hard because, Tibbs associates himself with Belichick and Saban and those kind of guys. The difference is Tibbs has always been self-aware to know that basketball is the number one passion for him. He was never going to get married. He was never going to have kids because he knew that they would always be second. So to be that self-aware, where a lot of guys in coaching aren't, or a lot of guys in this profession aren't, tells me something about Tibbs. The other thing about Tibbs in the off season is he'll ask you how your kids are. He remembers your kids' names. He is as dialed into your life and your personal life as any coach I've been around. And people would never guess that about Tibbs. Fantastic coach. I think he's one of the elite. And it's funny that you brought up how much you learned from Tibbs. His X's and O's and just talking basketball with him. It's like, it's the knowledge he has. It's unbelievable. And I will say, Billy X's and O's and willing to talk X's and O's. A lot of guys don't want to talk X's and O's. Fantastic.
Yep.
So what you learn from those guys is just it's unbelievable, and I don't think people fully appreciate that give and take. And we're not perfect. We're trying to cover the team as best we can as either writers or broadcasters. So for them to help input our knowledge is huge. It makes the broadcast better. It makes the story that you write better.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, I have so much respect for Billy. I mean, to be around him and to see him, the way he treats everyone, Joe,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're a writer or broadcaster. I'm not even talking about this business. I see him on the road. People come up to him, talk. He never blows people off. He's never
Right.
rude. He's never inconsiderate. And I think so much of him as a man and as a coach. And that's why, honestly, there are times where in your business you have to separate yourself because you're a journalist, and I get that. But as a broadcaster with the team, you want to see really good people succeed. And I
Yes.
really want Billy to where this franchise is back, where you go into a season saying, hey, you know what? Bull's going to be really, really, really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. One other thing too. You've done baseball. You filled in for baseball. You've done both TV and radio. What do you like doing better? Because obviously radio, people can't see it. So you have to paint everything for them. You have to paint the picture. You are their TV screen. With TV, you kind of have to sit back at times and just let the visual be the dominant thing that goes to the audience. What do you like better? Do you like painting that picture with a little more detail, or do you like the idea of letting the game speak and then you just interject when you feel like you need to interject?
Hmm. Okay, well, that's an intriguing question, and I'm going to give you a different slant. You know
Okay.
what the biggest adjustment for me was, and I really had to look in the mirror and swallow some humble pie, because I think humility is very, very important in this business, and I'm very grateful to be in my 27th year, but nearly 50 years as a professional broadcaster's ego. And when you're on TV, everyone's coming up to you. Hey, I saw the game. You're doing this,
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah,
this,
yeah.
and you start thinking of yourself in a different way. In
Gotcha.
radio, in radio, and I'm not devaluing radio by
I
any
understand.
stretch,
I got
but
you.
it's and I love my job and I love radio because we can't paint the picture. And I but when I was doing TV in Toronto for nearly 10 years, I mean, I replaced John Saunders, rest his soul, who did a great job with ABC and ESPN. They would fly him in from New York, and he would do the Raptors because he was from Toronto. And then his workload became so much with ABC that they said, okay, like you're doing radio in Toronto, you're doing now TV.
Mhm.
And so, but I had to really, really look in the mirror and say, you know what? You're not on TV anymore. You're doing radio, and that's fine. And so it was almost looking in the mirror and understanding you can still make a contribution to our
Right.
business and you don't have to be on TV. And
Well,
we
so
have fun on radio.
yeah, but here's the thing though too that people have to understand. And I learned this when I was covering the White Sox. There are some guys that are icons in a certain city. And I knew you as Chuck, radio guy. And then I remember that when I was covering the team for those first couple of years, when we go to Toronto, they honored you one night in Toronto. I was like, holy moly, this dude is like, he's like a rock star up here. I mean,
Yeah.
Drake coming over to you, and then so I was like, oh, Chuck, he's hiding it, but he's a big deal. And it was very similar to when I first started covering the White Sox. I never, Hawk Harrelson is Hawk Harrelson.
Yeah.
I never realized when we went to Boston, oh my goodness. And I don't think he played there that long. He is like Paul McCartney there. I mean, they worship him like no one I've seen. So I understand what you're saying, but there are some places, Chuck, you can downplay it all you want. There are some places that have completely embraced you for what you do and what you are. In Toronto, I was shocked with, because I don't know your history or how people perceive you when I'm first covering a team. I'm coming from the White Sox, and I think it was first was Rooney and Hawk and Farmer. It was Farmer and Rooney, and then Hawk, and then Stone came over. So I went through those broadcasters. And those guys were all phenomenal, but I never knew how beloved Hawk was in Boston until we went there, and it was like a rock star.
So Hawk joined that club because he had a run-in with Charlie Finley, and so he joined the team in '67, I think, the year they went to the World Series against the Cardinals. And then he got traded to Cleveland in like '71.
So his first time, he got traded to Cleveland. His first time back in Boston, and this is a true story, they pulled the bus up as close as they could to where the players go in. The fans literally ripped half of his clothes off. He used to wear like all the, the fringe stuff, and they start ripping. They start ripping at clothes because that's how much they were hurt by that trade and loved that dude. Which I've never heard a baseball player actually getting attacked like a rock star. So, and again, it's a Hawk story, but I did find out people did say, yeah, no, that did happen because sometimes Hawk, he taught Jesus how to golf. He taught, Gandhi how to pray. I mean, Hawk did a lot of stuff that you had to go, did he really? The one guy.
But I'll say this for Hawk. When I filled in for him, he had something happened to his eye and he had to rest his eye.
Right. Yeah.
And this is 2015. I'll say this. I had not done baseball in decades. I was a AAA announcer with the Columbus Clippers. And in 1979, in the summer before I actually moved to Chicago. And so the first game, ironically, is in Toronto. It's the White Sox and Blue Jays. Gotcha. I get a call from Hawk at about 3 p.m, wishing me well. If I needed anything, call me. He was great.
Yes.
And he would reach out, and I am so indebted for his kindness and his support.
The one guy that
I will say this: I love working with Steve Stone.
Yeah, Stoney's great. Stoney and I, we're both Cleveland guys. We're both Kent State guys. So when I was covering the team, he and I, whenever we went to New York, we'd go to the Carnegie Deli and get matzo ball soup. That was our tradition. Awesome.
Steve
awesome
is
guy.
Fantastic. Awesome man.
The other guy too, and God rest his soul, Farmio.
Yeah.
Ed Farmer. Look, you either loved Ed or you hated Ed. And if Ed loved you, he treated you like family. I remember there was one time, it was a couple years on the beat. He's like, bring your license tomorrow. We're in Baltimore. It's like, bring your license tomorrow. I'm like, what for? He never wanted to tell you. Just make sure your license is with you tomorrow. All right, Farmio. We get there. He calls me up to his press box. Hey, this is so-and-so. He's the head of the Secret Service in charge of the watching the president. Give him your license. We're all going to the White House tomorrow for a secret tour. Okay, so a bus picks us up. At first when he told me this, I'm like, Farmio, you're BS. And then, I'm like, okay, so we go. We were in the Oval Office. Remember, Mansu Lee was there from Korea. He was touching confidential folders on the president's desk, and they were like, Mansu Lee, don't touch it. It was like, we would stop, and a guy would whistle and say, look up in that tree, and you'd look up, and there'd be a guy you couldn't even see him, complete camouflage, just up in the tree with the sniper, right? It was the coolest tour ever of the White House. And I'll tell you, if Farmio told you he was going to do something, and as crazy as it sounded, that man did it.
Yes.
So.
And,
all right, before I get go ahead.
We would talk Notre Dame all the time.
Oh my God!
The history of Notre Dame football.
Yeah. He used to lead the marching band out. The whole thing and stuff like that. Before I get you out of here, one thing I like to do, and I've done it with the Bulls players. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's a little interrogation room. Quick questions. The quickest answer that comes to your head. Have fun with it. Okay, you ready?
Uh-huh.
All right, first one. Who's a better dancer, you or Trump?
Trump.
Okay. Which Hall of Fame or / Distinguished Award are you the most proud of? You got the Chicagoland Sports Hall of Fame. You got the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame, WGN Radio Walk of Fame, National Bobblehead Hall of Fame.
Chicagoland Sports Hall of Fame.
I would have said bobblehead if I was you. I think that's the coolest one. What TV show is a guilty pleasure of yours that no one would think Chuck watches? I know you don't watch a lot of TV.
I would say The Chosen.
Okay. Best basketball player you've ever seen, not named Michael.
Best basketball player I've ever seen, I'm going to say Oscar Robertson.
Okay. Grossest thing Bill Wennington has eaten in front of you?
Mayonnaise on a hot dog.
Okay, I've heard that. I can't believe that. If you weren't doing the Bulls, sport or a team you would love to broadcast for? And it doesn't have to even be basketball.
The Seattle Supersonics.
Okay, and we're hoping they get a team back there. What phrase do you like better? Salami and cheese or onions, baby, onions?
Salami and cheese.
You like that one better? Okay. What's the last song you listened to?
Ain't No Mountain High Enough by the Supremes.
Look at you. Load management, bad for the game or a necessary evil?
Bad for the game.
Okay. The ongoing or the newly feud between DeMar DeRozan or Drake, who do you pick?
I love Drake, and
I
love
know you
DeMar.
do, but he said DeMar's not getting that number retired.
No, that's not true. You know, and I know he's getting his jersey retired, so we can move on.
This is a fun one because I've gotten some good answers on this one before. All right, the team plane with the traveling party. We don't have to get it like into PR, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Goes down on an island. Who is the first eaten and who is the last survivor? Be a player, a coach, whoever you want.
No. The first eaten.
First eaten.
I don't know, Joe. Come on.
Zach Levine said Stacey King. Just saying.
Fine. There you go.
Stacey, who's the last survivor? Out of all the players, coaches, which dude do you think is most equipped to survive an island the longest?
Stacy.
He can't be first eaten in the survivor.
Oh,
they just eat his leg and he's fine?
Oh, my God.
All right, Chuck.
Okay.
Love you, buddy. Thanks for
Joe,
doing
you're
this.
Awesome. Thank you.
I will see you in New York tonight and on this as this brutal month continues of travel, New York and Cleveland. So
yeah,
thanks for doing this, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That was Chuck Swirsky. Loved having him. He was great. Yeah, always thought it was funny that people think we have some kind of Twitter feud. Look, I like busting balls on Twitter. Anyone that follows me knows that. But Chuck is awesome. So a couple things I want to do with this pod. Want to try having guests on, obviously. I don't want to break down too much Bulls basketball. I mean, if there's things that are significant, obviously we'll address those. But a segment I want to do every week is a Cowley Island Rant. Obviously, Cowley Island was a term that was from the White Sox days. If I report a story, the White Sox were very good at saying it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie, as long as they could, even though it ended up being the truth. And they'd get the competing papers to say it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie. So it put me on an island. So that's when the nickname Cowley Island came up. This week's Cowley Island Rant is load management. And the very thing I asked Chuck about. Look, the NBA could be in trouble here. Not now, not with this current TV deal, but in 10 years or however long that next big deal comes up. Here's my concern. Both baseball and basketball, they let the nerds in the building, and that's fine. That's fine. I think I value stats. I value analytics. They should have their own office to go, the exit velocity is blah, 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 blah. That's fine. But then they start letting the nerds in the front office. Again, I don't have a problem with that as long as there's a gatekeeper and someone to keep eyes on and say it's not just all about the numbers. What's happened now is when you watch baseball, you watch the NBA, baseball has already become very regional. It's just regional. The TV deals are basically all regional. National baseball games, just look at the eyes on them. They're way down. So it's a concern. Basketball still has a national appeal, but when you're resting your best players because some nerd told you, well, his load management, his miles run, and his pace of the game, blah, 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 and that's how you are running your team, you're in trouble. And people want to say, oh, look what Popovich did. Look, he won those titles when he rested Tim Duncan and he rested Kawhi and he rested. Okay. He did not rest those guys early on in their career. You go back and look at Tim Duncan's numbers. He was 40 minutes a night his first couple of years. Tim Duncan earned that right by winning Pop rings. And once you earn those rings, then Pop did load management. So my concern right now is the start of this basketball season has been, it's been a kick in the pants for the fans because you tune into a game and you can't even see or know if your guy's playing that night. Whether it's Zion, whether it's Embiid, he's back, So they need to clean that up. because this could be headed towards a bad thing. You don't want to go down the path of where baseball is, where everything just becomes regional, and you'll have your national teams, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and then basketball, you'll have Lakers, Boston, blah, blah, blah. So that's my rant of the week. It's great that they let the nerds in. It's great. Moneyball. Let me tell you something about Moneyball. Moneyball should have just been called Moana or Toy Story, because not once in the movie, I didn't read the book because I knew it was BS, but not once in the movie do they talk about what Moneyball really was. Moneyball was Barry Zito, Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, 20-game winning starting pitchers. That was Moneyball. All the other crap, on base percentage, all that stuff, that was nice. That was like little pieces to put around it. But Moneyball was 3 20-game winning pitchers, Cy Young type guys that you could throw out there almost every night. That's the Cowley Island Rant. And then I want to get to a list. Every week I'd like to do a list. This week's list. Those of you that were able to catch Duke last night and watch Cooper Flagg put on a show before the entire team started cramping up again, which seems to be a problem at Duke. You saw how special this kid is, why teams have come into this year knowing that this was a tank year. They're not going to say it, but that's really what they're doing. So the Bulls everyone knows the situation. The Bulls need to finish in the bottom 10 to keep their first-round pick for a 25 draft class. That's not just Cooper Flagg. I mean, it is loaded. Ace Bailey, who I think has not played yet for Rutgers, he's dealing with an injury, but a guy to keep an eye on. Some scouts say he's, 1B if Cooper Flagg's 1A. But and it's not just those guys. This goes 7, 8 deep of guys that are organizational game changers. So a huge draft, especially compared to last year's draft class, which was so. You have teams that have come in with the mentality to tank. The Bulls are in that mix. They won't admit it, but the Bulls are in that mix. These are the teams. There's 6 teams I don't think they can catch. I don't think they can be worse than. Number 1, the Wizards. They've had some good moments so far this year, but I think the Wizards are the worst team. Jazz, they've come in with the mentality, we have Lauri Markkanen lockdown, but we are tanking. The Raptors, I mean, their players, I think it was Podol on Media Day, basically said, we all know what's going on here, and we're just going to have to deal with it. They've come in as an organization and made sure their players understand this is the tank here. The Trailblazers, whether they came in with that mentality, they are just a tank team. The Pelicans, I think what's going to happen is they are going to see the writing on the wall. They're going to trade Brandon Ingram, and then Zion is Zion, where he plays, and you're like, wow, and then you don't see him for a month because he pulls a hammy. And the Pistons. Look, the Pistons, they could be intriguing. I think talent for talent, the Bulls are better. But they won't be looking to trade or dump guys come February like the Bulls are. So that's one to keep an eye on. The teams that are in the same area code as the Bulls, and these are the ones that could push them out of the top 10, the scary kind of teams, Charlotte Hornets. And I actually like their starting 5. I don't think they have a lot of depth. The Brooklyn Nets, I will say this. Play their asses off. Play hard. I just don't, talent-wise, I just don't know if they have enough to be better than the Bulls. The Atlanta Hawks are basically the Bulls of the South. You've got players that have big contracts that you shouldn't have given big contracts to. They're hard to move. So, and you can't move them. But here's the thing. Atlanta does not have a first-round pick. I think that's automatically going to the Spurs, who could have 3 picks in the lottery if they fall. So Atlanta has no incentive to tank, and that could help the Bulls because they don't have a first-round pick. And then finally, the Spurs. They were supposed to take a jump with Wemby year 2. I haven't seen it yet. I still see Wemby being basically put out as a 2-guard way too often instead of getting his 7-foot-plus ass down in the paint and doing Wemby things. I understand he could shoot it. That doesn't mean you always have to shoot it from outside. So those are the teams I think you have to keep an eye on that could be pushing the Bulls out of the top 10. Look, if the Bulls finish out of the top 10 and are either miss the play-in or are in the play-in and get eliminated, it is a catastrophic failure by this front office. And I think they know that. I don't think they will allow that to happen. I hope not. So So that's it. That's podcast 2. And hopefully we will be back next week. And this is Joe Cowley, the Chicago Sun-Times. You can read me at the newspaper there, and then also at J. Cowley Hoops. And remember, I got next.